Welcome to Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Al-Mayadeen television, coming to you this evening from the ancient, oh so ancient and oh so beautiful city of Tyre in the south of Lebanon. I'm surrounded by objects that are thousands of years old. I could give you a history lesson for the rest of the evening just on the little piece of ground surrounding me, where are monuments and pillars and stones from civilization after civilization, which made this place the beautiful jewel of Lebanon and indeed the Mediterranean, which it is. If you haven't visited Tyre, I promise you, you really ought to. In part, we'll be talking about history this evening, but it's not, alas, ancient history, and it's history that casts its shadow over every move that's currently taking place in the Middle East and indeed across the world. Because the subject that we're going to be remembering tonight on Kalima Horra, the free word, remember, we believe that every word has the right to be free. And I'll be speaking plenty of free words this evening. And my studio audience here in Tyre will be also. But they're our free words. They're not the words of Al-Mayadeen. So if you don't like what you hear, blame me rather than Al-Mayadeen television. We're remembering tonight the perfidious Albion and its then young American imperialist ally, which overthrew the democratic, nationalist, progressive government of Dr. Mossadegh, the elected Prime Minister of Iran, to punish him for taking into the hands of the Iranian people themselves their God-given natural national resources, principally oil and gas. That's right. In order to punish an elected Prime Minister for taking into national ownership that which belonged to the people of Iran, the United Kingdom from which I come, the parliament in which I have sat for almost a quarter of a century, and its American ally, which had to be persuaded by the British in order to do so, mounted a coup d'etat to overthrow the elected government of Iran and install the tyrant Shah, whose jackboot thereafter for 36 years stood on the neck of the people of Iran and gave everything to the nations which had brought him to absolute power, absolute dictatorship. Indeed, you'll remember Norman Schwarzkopf, Stormin' Norman, the man who invaded and crushed the Iraqi people 20 years or more ago. Norman Schwarzkopf was brought into Iran by the tyrant Shah in order to build the Savak, the dirtiest, most gruesome, most murderous mukhabarat to be found anywhere in this region. And competition was stiff at times for that title. So the footprint of the British and American imperialists in Iran began long before the overthrow of Mossadegh, but took a decisive turn on August 15, 16, 1953, when they started their maneuvers to bring about the downfall of the elected government of Iran. The supporters of the government, which was the vast majority of the people in the country, were thereafter hunted down, imprisoned, exiled, tortured, and murdered in very large numbers. Now, this is not ancient history. Although I'm not old, I was born just after these events, and some of the people in this audience this evening who are older than me actually witnessed these events. And it's not ancient history because it informs absolutely everything that's happening today. Because the same Britain and America are still conspiring to bring down the government of Iran, and for very largely the same reason. They hated Mossadegh because he didn't follow their orders, and he was determined to stand up for the people of Iran and nobody else. And they hate the government of Iran today for exactly the same reason. Because the Islamic system in Iran, which had to fight a ferocious revolutionary battle in order to destroy that dictatorship, also refuses to follow the orders of the British and the Americans and the French, who wish to continue to dictate events here on the ground in this region. Then, as now, they were able to count on some pretty grisly allies. The criminal classes of Tehran were paid money, big money, to mount the kind of insurrectionary maneuvers which eventually led to the bringing down and the arrest and the house arrest for the rest of his life of the elected Prime Minister. Criminal classes today, some in exile, but some, no doubt, internal, are also being paid money and deployed by the same imperialist countries to make problems inside Iran. Iran was not perfect in the time of Mossadegh, and it's not perfect now. It had weaknesses in its democracy then as now. But surely the key point is this: the Iranian government is the government of Iran. It has to govern in the interests of the people of Iran, and not in the interests of Britain or America, and not in the interests of oil and gas. The great multinational company that we know today, BP, started its life as British Persian Petroleum, and it was Iran's determination to take into its own ownership its own oil and gas, which began this modern chapter in the interference by the big powers in the lives and the future and the destiny of the people of Iran. Then, as now, strange allies were adduced. I talked about the criminal classes. Let me talk about the criminal political classes. The criminal political classes in this region who are ready to conspire with the United States of America, the country which makes it possible for Palestine just to be 20 minutes from here, but none of us can go. The United States of America, which is determined to sanctify by diplomatic recognition wholly occupied Jerusalem as the capital of what they call Israel. Yet despite all the crimes of Britain and America in this region, and you know them well here from the Crusaders until now, there are Arabs who are ready to conspire with Britain and America against another Muslim people, another Muslim country, the Islamic Republic of Iran. And in order to do so, in order to fool the people of this region into supporting them doing so, they are throwing sand in your eyes to blind you to the truth that you have far more in common with the Muslims in Iran than you do with the people who are killing Muslims all over the world in the Western imperialist countries. They're throwing sand in your eyes to divide you so that the Sunnite will hate the Shiite, so that the Arabs can be redivided, in a new Sykes-Picot 2, as I have described it. Indeed, 10 years ago in this very city, I told people in this audience that the day would come that they would seek to remake Sykes-Picot, this time not on a national basis, but on a confessional and sectarian basis. They would try to make a Druze country here, a Christian country there, a Shiite country there, a Sunnite country there, not 23 Arab countries, maybe 123 Arab Emirates, small and weak, the better to be divided in order that they can be ruled. That's the game that they're playing today. They're trying to persuade the Arabs that an American attack on Iran would be justified and would be in their interest. And I'm sorry to tell you that everywhere I go, I find Arabs who have been fooled by this rhetoric. Arabs who have been fooled into believing that Mrs. Hillary Clinton or Senator John McCain or Senator Joseph Lieberman or any of the other gang who have been committing crimes against Arabs and Muslims all of their political lives, that somehow they have ended up on the right side of one Arab-Arab dispute or another. It's not true. Remember what happened to Iraq and remember what happened to Iran. We're going to discuss with experts here this evening, people who are educated in Iran, people who saw the revolution in Iran, people who know the political maneuvers that are going on around them. And we hope thereby, on this near anniversary of that coup, as we come towards the 60th anniversary of that coup which overthrew Mossadegh, to come to some clarity about who's up to what and who's trying to fool who here in this Arab Middle East and the wider Muslim world. I've got to take a break now. I hope that introduction has served to spark the debate that this beautiful setting in the ancient city of Tyre thoroughly deserves. I'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you this evening from the ancient and beautiful city of Tyre in South Lebanon. We're discussing the coup d'etat which overthrew the elected government in Iran almost 60 years ago, and the coup d'etat that they're planning today to try to get rid of the government of Iran, and for largely the same reason. I told you we had experts in the audience, people who can talk, men and women. And the first of those is Dr. Nuruddin, a very important man in the education sphere here in Tyre. Brother, please give us the benefit of your perspective on this.
شريف نور الدين ACE University Directory. بالسابق زرت لبنان للمرة الأولى عام 77 ما قبل انتصار الثورة الإسلامية في إيران. وزرت لبنان اليوم ما بعد 2000 وما قبل 2000، وفي اللحظة الآن موجودين نحن وياك في لبنان بلدك الثاني. أهلا وسهلا فيك. شو رؤيتك حول موضوع شو المفارقة ما بين ما قبل ثورة الإسلام، انتصار إيران دولة الإسلام ما قبل 79 بهاللحظة اليوم اللي عم نعيشها بالصراع العربي الإسرائيلي؟ شو دور إيران بهذا الموضوع؟ اثنين، تحدثت قبل 10 سنوات كما أذكر بأكثر من مكان حول موضوع مشروع أمريكي صهيوني للمنطقة، وأسميت مشروع سايكس-بيكو 2. كما نعلم سايكس-بيكو 1، سايكس-بيكو أول، سايكس-بيكو 1 هو مشروع تقسيم العالم العربي إلى دول. واليوم مشروع، هل هناك حقيقة مشروع أمريكي في المنطقة هو مشروع سميته بمشروع سايكس-بيكو 2، تقسيم الدول العربية إلى دويلات تحت شعار الحرب المذهبية والطائفية؟ هل هذا صحيح؟ وما هو دور أمريكا بهذا المشروع؟ اثنين، وما هو دور إيران بمواجهة هذا المشروع في قلب الصراع العربي الإسرائيلي؟ وشكرا جزيلا لك.
Well, thank you, Brother Nuruddin has declared himself, before I could do so, that he was the man that I predicted 10 years ago too, that this Sykes-Picot 2, and I called it Sykes-Picot 2 then, 10 years ago, was on its way. Because I knew that the pattern of dictatorship in the Arab world, in the 23 Arab countries that Sykes-Picot 1 had divided you into, was no longer stable. And that the day would come when these dictators would fall. And so the imperialist powers had to look for a new footing, a new foothold to remain in control of this area, so they could continue to steal your wealth, and so they could continue to protect the illegitimate state that they called Israel just 20 minutes from here in South Lebanon. 20 minutes from here we could be in Palestine. And they had to achieve both of these goals. So I knew that their thinking caps were on. The best way, from their point of view, was to make more Arab countries, more and more and more Arab countries, based not on nationalism, because nationalism always had the possibility that Arab nationalism would begin to bring these countries together, but based on confession, based on sectarianism, all the more easy to put one against the other, or 10 against 5, or 25 against 45, to make you fight each other, hate each other, be preoccupied by each other. Instead of thinking about Israel, think about the other small Arab country that they have brought about next door. That's the game that they are playing. You can't blame them. Sykes-Picot cannot be blamed. They were imperialists. The scorpion stings because it is a scorpion. The imperialist schemes because he is an imperialist. So we can't blame them. We have to blame those who are fooled by them, and fooled by them over and over and over again. You know the old saw, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. This is true. And that's exactly where we are now. When I first came to Tyre in 1977, when there was no Hezbollah, no Amal, no Mukamama here in the south, Arafat was the chief here. Hamas didn't exist. The political landscape was completely different. Iran was under the dictatorship of the Shah. Look how things have changed, for the better and for the worse in some cases. Now Iran will never again be ruled by a tyrant like the Shah. Now the Shiite people in Lebanon will never go back to invisibility. The Shiite people in Lebanon are big and tall and strong, and everybody in the world knows it. Everybody watched the Lebanese resistance inflict the only ever defeat in military battle upon what they call Israel just down the road in 2006. So everybody knows that everything has changed here. And I believe that the imperialists are making a mistake in thinking that this new level of consciousness that exists can be somehow twisted and bent to their will. Revolutions are processes, not events. The Arab revolutions which broke out less than 2 years ago are still in process. At the moment, many of them look like revolutions without content. The form of revolution, but no content. Just like the year of revolutions in Europe in 1848, which Karl Marx described as revolutions of no content. Nothing changed as a result of those 1848 revolutions in Europe. But I believe that many things will change as a result of the political changes still underway here. But they will not all be good. And there's a danger that some of them will be bad. There's a danger if we get this Sykes-Picot 2, we'll be praying for the return of Sykes-Picot 1. It's possible that Sykes-Picot 2, if it's successful, will be much worse than Sykes-Picot 1. Dr. Ghassan, you were educated in Iran before the revolution, if I may say so.
مرحبا. دكتور غسان فران رئيس منتدى الفكر والأدب. الأسئلة صغيرة لكن في تعقيب بسيط. ذكرت حضرتك أنه من قام بالجرائم في المنطقة وفي إيران هم الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية والبريطانيين، وأحب أن أضيف بأن الفرنسيين أيضا قاموا بالكثير من المجازر ولا نستطيع أن نغفلهم، فهم الطرف الثاني من سايكس بيكو. ثانيا ما جرى في إيران بالعام 1953 والانقلاب أو الثورة أو عملية أجاكس على مصدق، الدكتور محمد مصدق المنتخب شرعيا كرئيس للحكومة، كان هناك ظروف كثيرة داخلية وخارجية ساهمت في عملية الانقضاض على هذه الانتخابات الديمقراطية وعلى إسقاط مصدق. وكان هناك دور بارز للCIA وخاصة العميل أو الضابط الأمريكي روزفلت، حفيد روزفلت الرئيس، والذي قام بدور كثير سلبي. وكما ذكرت حضرتك وأنه استأجر الزعران والشبيحة وكل الهمج في الشارع الإيراني ليسيروا في مظاهرات ويخربوا ويقلقوا الأمن الداخلي الإيراني. وكانت الظروف الدولية كذلك الأمر مساعدة للبريطانيين والأمريكان. كان الاتحاد السوفيتي ما بعد وفاة ستالين حديثا ولا يستطيع اتخاذ قرارات قوية في مواجهة التحرك الأمريكي البريطاني. هناك في تحركات في الوطن العربي، ثورة عبد الناصر 53 في مصر ساعدت بتسريع القرار بإسقاط مصدق حتى لا يكون هناك توافق ما بين الموقف الإيراني والموقف العربي، وبالتالي ساهم بقوة في إسقاط هذا النظام المنتخب ديمقراطيا، علما أن الشاه كان قد خرج من إيران وأصبح في خارج البلاد. أجريت المقارنة حاليا بأن الثورة الإسلامية في إيران تتعرض لنفس الضغوطات، ونحن نعلم بأن الانتخابات الأخيرة وكيف دعم الأمريكي والغرب ما سمي بالعمل بالإصلاحيين وأحاول إثارة البلبلة في الشارع الإيراني ومحاولة إسقاط الرئيس المنتخب ديمقراطيا رئيس نجاد ومحاولة خلق فوضى شبيهة بما جرى ب 53 أيام الرئيس مصدق. لكن حاليا وكانت الظروف آنذاك من حوالي 3 سنوات روسيا لم تكن قد استعادت دورها القوي والفعال على المستوى العالمي، وكانت الظروف الدولية تقريبا متشابهة، علما أن هناك في موقف عربي متضامن مطلق مع الغرب في محاولة إسقاط النظام في إيران. السؤال هون، هل تعتقد الآن بأن الظروف التي أتاحت للولايات المتحدة الأمريكية والبريطانيين آنذاك في إسقاط حكومة مصدق هي ذاتها المتوافرة حاليا في مواجهة إيران، علما أن إيران تقدمت عسكريا صناعيا أمنيا إلى آخره؟
They are the same.
Another question please. السؤال الآخر حول ما ذكرته حضرتك وكررته هلا مرارا حول سايكس بيكو 2 سايكس بيكو 2، هل تعتقد بأن بداية رسم خارطة سايكس بيكو 2 هو ما يجري حاليا في سوريا، لما تأثيره على المحيط بكامله سواء في لبنان أو الأردن أو العراق أو حتى في تركيا وفي الخليج العربي وفي أماكن أخرى؟ هل تعتقد أن ما يجري في سوريا هو الترجمة الفعلية لسايكس بيكو 2 وبضغط وبممارسة من الأمريكي والبريطاني والفرنسي وكل من يمشي معهم ويسير معهم في الفلك من الرجعيات العربية وغير العربية؟ وشكرا لك.
It's such an important question. I can't deal with it in the time left to me before the break, but I will deal with it, God willing, immediately afterwards. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen Television, coming to you from the ancient and beautiful city of Tyre. Before the break, Dr. Ghassan asked a series of very penetrating questions, which would take me all night to adumbrate the full scope of the answers that are required. I hope he will permit me this shortened response. First of all, I was entirely wrong to leave France out of the list of criminals who carved up this area. How could I? Of course, here, from the Crusaders until Sykes-Picot and beyond, of course, France was playing its devilish role along with perfidious Albion, the United Kingdom, in these crimes, no doubt. But in the Iran coup of 1953, France didn't really have a role. But France is back, playing exactly the same role that they would have liked to have played all along in Syria, in Libya. The French government was right at the front. Sarkozy, we thought, had a kind of Napoleon complex, a small man determined to look big on the international stage. But President Hollande is no different at all in the attitude that he is displaying in the current Arab dispute, civil conflict in Syria. Many things that you said struck home with me. But the most pertinent was whether these were the same forces in 1953 as now. And they definitely are. The personnel is different. The power relationship between them is different. The United Kingdom, as I said, repeatedly nagged the United States to overthrow Mossadegh. The United Kingdom wanted to overthrow him 2 years before, but the American government of Truman would not allow it. But when Eisenhower came to power and the Churchill government returned to power in England, the constellation of forces, a bit like Bush and Blair, the constellation of Churchill and Eisenhower coming together brought about the disastrous turn of events. And in parenthesis, it just goes to show the lie. They say that they're against Iran now because it has an Islamic government. But in 1953, it didn't have an Islamic government. It had a democratically elected nationalist government. They weren't against it because it was nationalist, and they're not against it now because it's Islamic. They were against it then as now because it refused to follow their orders and refused to govern their country in the interests of others rather than the interests of their own people. Brother Ahmed Yunus in the front row is next. Please give us your perspective on these events. Please, the floor is yours.
أحمد يونس مهندس ورئيس جمعية شبابية كشفية في مدينة صور. السؤال كان عندي حول قضية حيوية حول مؤامرة من قبل الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وإسرائيل بشكل خاص حول موضوع الملف النووي الإيراني. هذا الموضوع اللي يشغل بال العالم، وكان في سؤال دائما بإمكانية هل ممكن يتم توجيه ضربة لجمهورية الإسلامية؟ هل هذا الشيء هو بس للمناورة، فقط للمناورة؟ في شيء لازم نتذكره أنه المنشآت النووية الإيرانية بدت من عام 1967 خلال فترة الشاه، وتم إنشائها وكان بمباركة أمريكية، وكان في تجهيز من الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية لهذا الموضوع، وكانت معامل بشهر 1 وبشهر 2 انجز منها الاول ب 90% والثاني كان 50%. وصارت الحرب العراقيه الايرانيه ودمرت المعامل وبعدين تم استئنافها. فالقضيه هي انه في سؤال عند الشباب دائما وخوف انه في طلب دائم ان توصيف دقيق لموضوع الملف النووي. فالسؤال هو الأساسي أنه طبيعة إيران بهذه الفترة، هل هي تعتبر فرصة مؤاتية لها، هي أفضل فرصة مؤاتية لها أن تستمر في عملية الملف النووي وحقيقته؟ الملف النووي هل هو ملف نووي فقط للأغراض السلمية، ولا أنه لازم يكون العمل جاد نحو الحصول على سلاح نووي حقيقي عسكري؟
Well, Ahmed, what a brilliant question encapsulating exactly the heart of the matter. The first point that needs to be made is, why is Iran not allowed to have nuclear weapons when Israel, 20 minutes away from here, is allowed to have hundreds of nuclear weapons? What's the logic of that? What's the logic of Israel having hundreds of nuclear weapons pointed at every part of this region, while Iran would not be allowed to build one nuclear weapon? After all, they told us throughout the Cold War that the possession by both sides of a nuclear weapon was the best guarantee of peace. This is what they used to tell us as their justification for British, for example, possession of nuclear weapons. Second, if I was Iran, I would build a nuclear weapon, because I know that Israel is pointing nuclear weapons at me and the Western countries are trying to destroy my revolution. I would build a nuclear weapon. But the third reason, the third point, is that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon and has theological prohibition from the Ayatollah Khomeini against building a nuclear weapon. When I put the points I've just made to you to them, they say we cannot. We cannot build a nuclear weapon because the line of the Imam was that these weapons are haram. These weapons, which are unlimited in space and time, in the damage that they can do, are forbidden. So Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, but is being threatened, while Israel has already built hundreds of nuclear weapons and is being rewarded rather than sanctioned or threatened with violence, bombardment, invasion, war, regime change, and all the other things that they have in mind for Iran. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which has the task of policing these matters, has said over and over and over again that there is no evidence, I'm quoting them, quote, no evidence that Iran is seeking to build a nuclear weapon. And as you rightly pointed out, this is all hypocrisy. Not only are the Western countries doing the threatening themselves, sitting on an arsenal of hundreds, thousands of nuclear weapons, telling others that they may not have them, but the United States itself sold the first nuclear energy equipment. Westinghouse and other firms were the people who gave the Shah and tried to force the Shah to build a peaceful nuclear energy industry. Every country has the right at any time of its choosing. This is my point to the last of your points. You asked, is this the right time for Iran to do so? Every country has the right at the time of its choosing to develop peaceful nuclear energy. Iran has signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It allows inspectors to intrusively inspect at any and all times, unlike Israel, which refuses to sign and would never dream of allowing an inspection of its territory. So I think this whole nuclear question is a pretext. It's a pretext for aggression and regime change against Iran, because they want to bring Iran back into their hands. They want a stooge government. That's why they were happy for the Shah to have nuclear power, because he was their slave. He was a tyrant to his people, but he was not a tyrant to them. He was their slave. So it makes a big difference who gets these nuclear weapons. If it's a slave government, they can have them. It's a government that follows their orders, they can have them. But if it's a government that does not, then they may not. My last point, because you made so many good ones. I believe, this is not the view of Al-Mayadeen or anybody else, I'm not speaking for anybody else here but myself. I believe Iran made important mistakes in relation to Iraq. I knew that when the United States invaded and occupied Iraq, that if they could, Iran would be next. And if I knew that, Iran should have known that. I believe they made important mistakes. But here we are standing now. The question is, are we going to support another attack on another Muslim country the destruction of the strength of another Muslim country. After all, where does that end? It can only end with no Muslim countries with any strength at all. Only in Muslim countries with no engineering base, no science base, no nuclear energy, no powerful army, no national unity. That's what they want. That's the kind of Arab and Muslim world that they want. Ms. Randa, please give us the benefit of your knowledge.
أنا رندا بزي إدارية بمدرسة الميادين الدولية وبنفس الوقت بإذاعة وموقع صوت الفرح. أنا عندي سؤال، إذا بنرجع شوي لورا وقت ما الأمريكان دخلوا على العراق بحجة الملف النووي وفاتوا على العراق وما زالوا يعني واللي بدهم إياه صار. هلا هيدي المسألة يمكن انعكست ببعض الدول العربية إيجابيا وليس سلبيا، يعني الثورات العربية اللي صارت ببعض الدول والشعب اللي قدر حقق ذاته أو حقق مطالبه، الديمقراطية اللي كان عمالي بيطرحها الديمقراطية اللي هي على قياسه مش على قياس الأمريكان وعلى قياس البريطانيين. فسؤالي شو هو الملف بالتلميحات اللي دايما عمالة بتتكرر وبالأخص بمجلس الأمم المتحدة، شو هو الملف اللي عم يتحضر لإيران بحجة الملف النووي اللي إيران ماضي فيه؟ وأنا بدي أتشكرك لأنه دايما نحن كنا نحكي بهالمسألة انه اسرائيل الدوله الاسرائيليه بحق لها تمتلك، ما بعرف يمكن صار عندها هلا شي 200 راس نووي اذا انا مش غلطانه، بحق لها تمتلك روس نوويه، وايران ما بحق لها انه تمشي بملفها النووي لتوليد الكهرباء مثلا او لطاقه معينه. انه وين هالديمقراطيه اللي هن عمالي بيرسموها على قياسهم الامريكان والبريطانيه؟ وشكرا لك.
Democracy or hypocrisy is the question. These are hypocritic governments rather than democratic governments. What they are alleging against Iran is exactly the same what they alleged against Iraq, that it was building weapons of mass destruction. And Iraq was not. Iraq had not. And Iran is not. And Iran has not got weapons of mass destruction. But I tell you this, Ms. Randa, if America or Israel, which is the same thing, attacks Iran, they'll be making the biggest mistake in history, because there will be war throughout the world and for many, many years to come if they attack Iran. Iran is not like Iraq. It's not a broken country, weak, internally fantastically divided. The vast majority of Iranians will support their country if the Western powers attack it. And Iran is not weak. Iran is strong. And anybody who attacks it will find just how strong they are. It would be the biggest mistake in history. If you're listening, Mr. Obama, if you're listening, Mr. Cameron, it will be the biggest mistake in history for any of you to lift a hand against the Islamic Republic of Iran. I'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, here on Al Mayadeen TV. We believe that every word has the right to be free, and the words that I'm speaking this evening, and indeed my audience are speaking, are about Iran. Iran in the time of Mossadegh and the overthrow of his democratically elected government by Britain and the United States in 1953, beginning over 16th August of that year. And so coming up now to 60 years on, we have another attempted coup d'etat, this time a regime change threatened by massive bombardment by one or other of Israel and the United States. We've heard from professors and experts. We've heard from Dr. Randa. Now we want to go to the students and one of those, Ali Syed. Ali, go ahead, brother, please.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway. Welcome in this ancient city.
Thank you.
My name is Ali Syed. I'm a student in the Lebanese University Faculty of Engineering. I'm still 19 years old, i.e. a part of the Lebanese future. You say that we need 20 minutes to reach Palestine. My question is, what advice can you give us as the Lebanese youth in order to be in the 21st minute on the Palestinians' land before being in your age? Thanks.
What a very good question. It must be a good university you're attending. Very smart. A credit to your teachers and your parents. It won't be 21 minutes. That's the first point. But I don't believe it will be 21 years either. And I saw in the epic interview with our leader, Ghassan bin Jiddo, leader of Al-Mayadeen TV, and Said Hassan Nasrallah just the other night. I saw in this epic interview a sign of how the balance of power has changed, and Israel knows it. Israel knows that Said Hassan never says a word unless he can do, unless he can carry out that word. Israel knows that if Said Hassan promises a capability on the part of the Lebanese resistance, that it has to be true. Because Said Hassan is unlike most of the Arab leaders that we've seen before. He means what he says, and he says what he means. And when he said, if you attack us, we have the means to strike everywhere in your country, and we have the ability to put our hands on Jalil itself, this must be true. If it was not true, Said Hassan would not have said it. So if it's true, Israel must know it's true. And this shows the vulnerability of a settler state which was imposed here by European colonialist settlers because they could, because they had the force, the power to do it, but which can only be sustained now by others much more powerful than them outside. And as the Arab countries, one by one, eventually find their way to democratic government, government of the people, for the people, by the people, then this sea of Arabs around them will take on an entirely different character. Unless it is possible for imperialism to divide them all over again. This time not on the basis of artificial nationalism of the 23 Sykes-Picot 1 countries, but as I said, on the basis of maybe hundreds of tiny emirates all fighting each other and hating each other. If that happens, the Arabs will spend the next 100 years as they spent the last 100 years. And they will not achieve the greatness which could be theirs. From Marrakesh to Bahrain, 350 million Arabs with one language, one God, one culture, all this land, all this oil, all this gas, all this water, all these educated people, all this talent, all the youth. The Arabs should be a superpower in the world. But if this Sykes-Picot 2 is successful, you will be, my dear, even older than me, and you will still be dreaming of traveling 20 minutes down that road and seeing Palestine. And you will be only dreaming that Jerusalem one day will be free. But good question. Who's next? Let me take another of the students, may I? No, you're at the back. Yes, sir, go ahead in the red shirt. I love the color of your shirt.
Thank you. My name is Jafar Zayat. I work in marketing. Regarding Mr. Dr. Mossadegh, he used a British law because Churchill, after Britain was broke after World War II, he did nationalize British
British petroleum. He
so,
did.
So he gave them a dose of their
own medicine. Yes.
Yeah. So we like you to shed a little light on the hypocrisy of the West about WMDs and yellow cake of George Bush and Mr. Blair. Also, if you like to broaden the horizon of Arabic audience, because especially the new generation, they don't comprehend how U.S. create Al-Qaeda and support it and create Taliban, and then they hit it.
Yeah.
That's in the same notion they did it, how they carve Panama, and they create Panama, they carve it out of Colombia. And how the reason behind the American-Spanish War, if you could shed some light, because we are not the only victims of...
No, that's a very good point. A very, very good point.
Thank you.
In fact, a subsequent edition of Kalima Horra will be coming from Venezuela, where I'm going to be in part as an observer at President Chavez's, hopefully his re-election, yet again as president of Venezuela. They hate Chavez. Why does America hate Chavez? He's the most elected politician on the earth. He's won more elections, more referenda than any politician on the earth, and still they call him a dictator. Mossadegh was supported by 3/4 or more of the Iranian people, and still they overthrew him. The Palestinian government was elected, but because they didn't like the color of the Palestinian government, they sieged Gaza and murdered its people and starved them to death. These Western countries care nothing about democracy or human rights. These are just ploys. These are just tricks that they pull out to confuse and fool the people. They tell us they're concerned about human rights in Syria, but they didn't lift a finger to save the Palestinians under bombardment in Gaza. In fact, they gave Israel the weapons and the political support to do it. So, don't imagine that this is about because you are Arabs. It's not. The Vietnamese people were not Arabs. They were not Muslims. And millions of them were murdered by the same American and French imperialism. They do these things because they're imperialists, and they do them to people not because they're any nationality or any religion. They do them to people because they have to, in order to keep a stranglehold on those people, and more particularly their resources. It follows. Don't imagine that they prefer Sunni Muslims to Shiite Muslims. It depends where and when. They were happy to propel a Shiite government in Iraq into power. They would be delighted if a new Shah, Shiite Shah, could emerge in Iran. It's not about their view on confession or sect. It's not about their view even on religion, though Islam uniquely challenges them, in my view, because Islam requires the faithful people to stand up against injustice. It's a wajib, not an optional extra. Muslims are commanded to raise their hand against injustice if they can, to raise their voice against injustice if they cannot raise their hand, and to curse injustice from their heart if they can neither speak nor act against it. So Islam actually fundamentally is a challenge to imperialism in quite a unique way, I think. But they could quite happy, they are very happy with the Muslim rulers of some Arab countries, very happy. They don't care how many times they pray, how sincerely they pray. They don't care about any of that. They're not interested in how people dress. They just want to steal your things. They want Chavez out of Venezuela so they can control Venezuela's oil. And they want stooge governments here in this region so that they can steal your things that God gave you and make sure that it's not distributed fairly amongst you, but is spent instead in their countries, in their casinos, in their arms bazaars, in their bordellos, in their property markets and stock exchanges and banks. And of course, always, always to protect the illegitimate child they call Israel just 20 minutes down the road. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Please, the microphone. And then I'll come to you, madam. I didn't realize you had the microphone. Yes, sir.
علي دبوق عضو مجلس بلدي بسور أو رئيس جمعية ثقافية. بالنسبة لحديثك عن العبيد، إنه أمريكا بدها دولة عبيد، للأسف بنشوف إنه في 120 دولة مستعبديتهم على درجات مختلفة. والسؤال الكبير هو لأيمتى بده يستمر هالاستعباد، مش بس السياسي، كمان خاصة المالي. يعني الدولار اليوم أو الديون ال 14 أو 16 تريليون دولار اللي مخديتها أمريكا من العالم، وبعدها عم تسرق العالم كله، عم تستغله. لأي متى العالم قبلان بهالشي؟ وهالنظام يعني لوين راح إذا فرطت أمريكا؟ لأنه هو أشبه بنمر من كرتون أمريكا النظام. هيدا السؤال الثاني. السؤال الثاني هون نحن بس انه بالنسبه للنووي الايراني وهالشيء، انه دائما بيقولوا لنا انتم لبنان انه حزب الله مرتبط بالاجنده. يعني حزب الله ما خصه بشيء، البرنامج النووي الايراني ماشي، ونحن حزب الله او المقاومه نحن رد فعل على الاعتداء الاسرائيلي وعلى العدوان الاسرائيلي. فحتى بلبنان مثلا كمان للاسف انه مثلا امريكا حاطه قيود على مصارف، على اشخاص، على شيء. قسم كبير من الناس بلبنان خايفين انه تحكي كلمه بحطوها على الليسته السوداء. فكمان هون شو ممكن نقول لهم، كيف نوضح لهم؟
No, absolutely. I've only got 2 minutes, so I'm going to just answer the first of your questions now. A very, very great man, a very great philosopher, who's not in any philosophy departments of any universities, was a Jamaican reggae singer called Bob Marley. And he wrote a very wonderful song, many wonderful songs. But his most wonderful was Redemption Song. And in it are 2 lines on the subject of slavery. He says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but yourself can free your mind. This is the most profound truth. Because actually, I'm sorry to say this, and I really don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Nobody could enslave you if you didn't accept it. I was once with Abu Ammar and the late Chinese leader Zhou Enlai. Zhou Enlai said to Abu Ammar, the Arabs are not serious about taking Palestine back. If they were serious, they would all walk into Palestine and take it back, and nobody could stop them. But they would not, of course. Could not, would not. And this is the problem. These people who are enslaving you are not powerful. They only seem to be giants if we are sitting down. If we stand up, they're not giants at all. If the Arabs stood up as one and made one hand, nothing could stop them from liberating Palestine. Nothing could stop them from transforming this Arab world that I talked about. It's not James Bond you're fighting. Believe me, James Bond is a fictional character of long, long ago. You can beat them, but only if you believe it. And only if you act together. If you fall into their traps of hating your neighbor because Sykes-Picot gave him a different flag. Sykes-Picot gave you your flag and gave your neighbor a different flag and encouraged you to hate each other to see yourselves as different when you are the same. And even worse, if you fall into the trap of hating your neighbor inside your own country because he is Christian or Druze or Sunni or Shia, and you spend the next 100 years fighting each other. I'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Al-Mayadeen television, where we believe every word has the right to be free. That's why everybody, everywhere, is now watching Al-Mayadeen TV. Let's go. I need more women speakers. Let's go to the young woman, yes, towards the back of the audience.
Evening.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Asra Rahal, and I'm a student in Al-Afaq Academy.
Welcome.
My question is that, first of all, in your introduction, you said that Palestine is just 20 minutes far from here, and you say that we have to blame British and the American for not being there. But don't you think that we have to blame Arabs, that they're so like slaves for them, and they're the one that they always support them. They're not letting us go there. My other question is that Iran, there are new information that Iran has the ability to build uranium weapons in 1 year. So why did it bother to join the NPT? And do you think that in the World War III, if it has uranium weapons, it will use it or not?
It won't be World War III, but it will be war throughout the world, and it will last much longer than World War I and World War II. In fact, the Afghan war has currently been running for longer than the First and Second World Wars put together. And I'm not saying, I said that Britain was the author of the Palestinian tragedy. Sure, in the Balfour Declaration, Britain and America allowed Israel to exist and keep it in power and keep it in weapons and money. But actually, if you listen to the main burden of what I'm saying, it's the opposite. I'm saying we have to blame the Arabs and the Muslims for not uniting in order to free. After all, Jerusalem's not just any city. We're not talking about just any city here. We're talking about Jerusalem, where Jesus walked, where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to the heavens for the revelation and returned with it to humanity. This is not some small backwater city somewhere. And if the Muslims cannot be bothered to rescue Jerusalem from foreign bondage, then what's the point in praying 5 times? What's the point in fasting if you are allowing Jerusalem to be in the hands of foreigners? Now, I want to keep some. Yes, you, madam. Yes, in the white top. I like to balance men and women speakers. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. غنى جرجوعي, English teacher at Afaq Technical School and reporter at yasur.org.
Welcome.
First of all, I want to welcome you, and I'm glad to meet such a free man as well as you.
Thank you.
But because I'm a racist, I want to speak in Arabic.
Oh, go ahead. No, please. It's very important, actually, for this show that you do.
Okay. يعني نحن عم نلاحظ انه في هجمه قويه على ايران من قبل دول عربيه ومن قبل دول غربيه، مش بس من دول غربيه، يعني دول اسلاميه كمان. على شو برايك ايران عم بتراهن لتوقف هيدي الوقفه القويه ضد هيدي الهجمات كلها؟ ويا ترى هل ايران بالمستقبل يعني بيظل هيدا التعاون العالمي ضد ايران لانه يسقطوها ويحبطوها؟ هل برايك ايران قادره مستقبلا انها تكفي بهيدي القوه؟ هل عندها النفس انها تكفي بهيدي القوه اللي هي هلا فيها؟
I really think that Iran is very, very strong. Its political leadership is strong. The morale of that leadership is strong. The morale of the Iranian people is strong. And the unity, the national unity of the Iranian people, inside and outside Iran, will be tested by such an attack. And I believe that the imperialists will find that the Iranian people will not fail that test. I think the vast majority of Iranians would rise up against any attack upon their country to destroy its infrastructure, because that's what they're talking about. They're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cruise missile attacks And by the way, every cruise missile costs $1 million and will do tens of millions of dollars worth of damage and will kill thousands of people. Now, will the Iranians accept such savagery? I believe not. Will the broader Muslim world accept such savagery? I believe not. Will most Arabs accept? Some even may support such savagery. I believe not. I believe that some of the governments of the Arab world, some of which were shown by WikiLeaks to be begging America to make such an attack upon Iran, those rulers may find that they themselves undermine their own position if such an attack occurs. But Iran has the means to set the Gulf on fire in the event of such an attack, and I believe it will do so. I believe that if Iran is attacked within 1 hour, all of the oil fields on the Arab side of the Gulf will be in flames and they will burn until the end of the conflict. I believe that Iran will strike Israel back directly and hard and often. And I believe that there will be mayhem and violence everywhere in this region and in the world, and for a very long time. So that's why I said straight to camera, and I'm saying it again, Mr. Obama, Mr. Cameron, and others, don't do it. You'll be making the biggest mistake in history. Now, who next? Yes, sir, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
Dr. Ali Harb, AUCA University. I would like to highlight a few things, on the subject. First of all, we know that our tonight exposure was on Iran. I believe just the United States, England, France, and all the European community, they are targeting Iran. Just they would like to break the rising arrow, the rising star of the technological Iran. That's the main goal.
Yeah.
They want just Iran, the poor, Iran, just the creepy, that's it.
Yeah.
The problem now is, we in the Arab world, we know all, Lebanese, mostly the Lebanese people, even Arab citizens in all Arab countries, they understand that what America claimed with the European countries about that creative disturbance, that's what they started, in the Middle East. It becomes to be a full bloodshed for all the Arabs. Okay, we are pointing fingers on this and that, but unfortunately, as Arabs, we lack the leadership. We need leaders. Okay, we are just pointing about the reasons, but we are not after the solutions. And this is really our problem. We need people who are really asking and looking and going after solutions. And just that could be only created by creating awareness in the societies, in the public. That's the community job, And as long as we do not have those leaders, I believe we have so many years to go, and we will not just achieve anything.
Well, you have the best of all the Arab leaders. Said Hassan Nasrallah is the best of all the Arab leaders.
Right. That's right. I agree with you.
You have him here.
I believe.
I don't know where he is, but he's nearby here.
Exactly. But we need all those ones, like to support
Sure
Hassan
we do.
Nasrallah and others.
And it will have to be from a new generation. That's for sure.
Exactly.
But
Thank
look,
you.
the leaders emerge from events. Yeah? They don't. It's not something chosen in advance, nothing mystical about it. Leaders emerge from the events. We have to create the events. I am myself a soldier in the army of Commandante Che Guevara. Guevara acted, and when he acted, people followed. This is the key point. And when he fell, he said, in predicting his own death, he said, the question is not when the rifle will fall from my hand, but how many will come to pick up the rifle when it falls from my hand. And this is the question. All of us have to be leaders. All of us, because you're right, actually the Arabs are almost all of them politicians. I used to say when I used to go to Egypt under the dictatorship, even the man who was sweeping the Khan Khalili market, sweeping Fishawi Cafe, he's a politician. All Arabs are politicians. How could they not be? This whole area has been completely dominated by politics and international politics. So we all know, everybody watching this knows what's wrong, what needs to be done, the direction we need to go in. And we all have to act in unity to do that. And if we do, leaders will emerge. Leaders whose names we don't know yet. The Palestinian, the second intifada began in September. Its leaders were not known by anybody. Even Abu Jihad didn't know the names of the people who were leading the cells and the struggle in the intifada. Even Abu Jihad, who knew everything, didn't know who these leaders were. They emerged from the revolution, from the struggle. And that's what the Arabs have to do. It's not necessary for a leader to be on a white horse and wearing a crown. In fact, you don't want that kind of leader at all, if you ask me. Thanks, though. Great question. Who's got the microphone? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
حسن حايك من نت ضا منصور.
أهلين حسن.
نحن لما ضيعنا البوصلة الحقيقية اللي هي فلسطين، لما الشعارات اللي قلنا انتقلت من شعار تحرير فلسطين إلى شعارات كتير ضيقة وكتير فيها شعارات مذهبية وتفرقة، فعلا المشروع بدأ، المشروع المؤامرة يعني الأمريكية بلشت تنفذ من دول ومناطق إلى أن تغلغلت فيه بعض العقول لبعض الشعوب العربية. للأسف أنه في بعض الدول وبعض الشعوب عم تركب براسها هيدي الشعارات اللي عم تبت فينا الإعلام المشبوه والدولارات والنفط. طبعا هو الهدف معروف، هو حماية إسرائيل. هلأ كل الهدف هو حماية إسرائيل والاستغلال والسيطرة على كل الثروة العربية. أنا اللي بقوله أنه لما نرجع نحن للبوصلة الحقيقية لفلسطين، نرجع نرفع شعار فلسطين والوحدة العربية، نقدر نحن نقاوم هذا المشروع. السؤال المطروح هلأ، هل يمكن أنه إسرائيل تغامر وتقوم بخطوة أو منفردة أو بتغطية من أمريكا بضرب المفاعل النووي الإيراني وتأخذ المنطقة إلى المجهول؟ شكرا.
It cannot do so of its own volition. Israel could never make such an attack upon Iran without the permission of the United States, and inevitably the involvement of the United States, at least as a naval power. In the Persian Gulf, it's full of American naval assets, and Iran will hit them all. It will be like shooting fish in a barrel. Iran will hit those American naval assets in the Persian Gulf and set them on fire. And so it will very quickly become a conflict between America and Israel and the Islamic Republic of Iran. The conflict, therefore, will quickly grow to global dimensions, global proportions. And we should try to avoid that at all costs, I say again, to these leaders. I support Arab unity. I believe that Arab unity, Arab nationalism is the best solution for the Arabs. Again, I'm not speaking for Al-Mayadeen, because everybody can support Arab nationalism. Sunni, Shiite, Christian, Druze, Arab Jews, everybody, Arab atheists, Arab socialists, communists, everybody can support the idea of one Arab nation from the Atlantic to the Gulf. I believe that's the best way forward for the Arabs. But if they will not go in that direction, they should at least not go in the opposite direction. The opposite direction being a further salami slicing of the Arab people on a sectarian basis, because there's no easy way to do that. If there's conflict between sects in this area, well, the sects are living next door to each other, in the next street to each other. Let me get in one last question. The gentleman there, yes, go ahead, sir.
My name is Ali Ahmed Saleh, and I'm from AUCE University.
Ahlan Ali.
Well, it will be more general. In previous occasions or previous wars, we saw that Russia and China stood still. They didn't interfere, such as in Libya or in Egypt. They just, at the beginning, Russia was against NATO interfere in Libya. Then she said it was okay.
They allowed it, yeah.
Yes. But in Syria, we see that China and Russia, they more than one time, they said no to any interfere, and they didn't support any war against Syria. Even they put a veto more than once at this point. So, and since everything is not free in this world, what was the price that Iran and Syria are paying to Russia and China so they
I don't think it's about price.
Well,
I think it's about Russia and China.
No, it's not about love.
No, it's not about love. It's about politics. And
yes,
it's America, Russia and China saying to America and Britain and France, you don't rule the world. You cannot go around doing whatever you like.
Why now?
Changing which? Because now Russia and China are strong enough to do it, and America and Britain are weak enough to have it done.
Libya conflict wasn't that far away.
No, but the balance moved when China decided that now that it's the second most powerful economy in the world, and within 10 years, at least, maybe sooner, China will be the most important country in the world. And they've made a decision, a strategic decision. There will be no more Libyas. There will be no more Libyas. There will be no more occasions when you can decide who you invade and who you overthrow, whether or not the United Nations Security Council agrees with you or not. This is the turning point in the world. There's an emerging new set of alliances. And I say hallelujah. I say the fact that China is standing up as a world power for the first time and saying to the US, no, 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 is a very welcome and significant turning point. And Russia too, under Putin, is recovering its strength and some of the dignity which it lost in the Yeltsin years. And Russia and China, together with their allies in Latin America, like Chavez, like the other progressive governments in South America, and the emerging rejection in this region of imperialist design, that's a very powerful bloc. And bankrupt economies like the United States and the United Kingdom should beware of biting off more than they can chew. They can't even pay their own electricity bills at home. They have millions of their own people unemployed. They have people hungry in the streets of the United States, begging with bowls. And still they want to go around the world trying to be the emperor of the world. Those days are gone. As Deng Xiaoping said to Prince Charles at the handing over of Hong Kong, the days when China could be ordered what to do by foreign countries is over. Hallelujah, I say. That's my free word. I hope that they've been of some value to you. If you've enjoyed the show at all, then come back next week when, God willing, I'll be presenting another. Until then, may you go in peace. Thank you very much, all of you.